Morning, all. All right, so we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning today. Season preview for them as I get into the second half of these previews. Half done, half to go, so 16 down, 16 to go. For Tampa Bay, they were 46, 30, and 6 this past season. They were 13th overall in the league. A bit of a drop from where they usually have been over the last few years, but keep in mind that the years they won the Stanley Cup, they were third in their division. So this is a team that definitely seems to do well in the playoffs and doesn't really put the pedal to the metal in the regular season like they did. I think 2018, 2019 was a teaching moment for them, and I think they learned their lesson there. So their goals scored per game, 3.41 goals per game. That's a good number. Goals against per game, 3.07, right around league average. And their power play and penalty kill, those numbers are solid. The power play, 25.4%. If you're scoring that often on the power play, got a pretty good power play. Penalty kill, 79.7%. Yeah, I mean, you'd like to have it at 80%, ideally. But in the NHL this past season, power plays were scoring at a ridiculous rate. 79.7 isn't bad. Now, of course, they made the playoffs this past spring. Lost in the first round to Toronto in a series where, yes, they may very well have outplayed Toronto, but history remembers who won and who lost, and the narrative of who played better and who didn't fades with time. Trust me, I've seen it. So the last time they went around, of course, 2022, when they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final and lost against Colorado, and they were trying to win their third straight Stanley Cup. They won their Stanley Cups in 2020 and 2021, and those were the first ones they'd had since 2004. So for Tampa Bay, a team that traditionally has been quite good, and then they go through quick rebuilds. We'll see if that happens again. I don't think so. And what I'm talking about is after that '04 Stanley Cup, they fell off pretty quickly. And there's been other times where they've just fallen off the map, and then they build themselves up almost right away. But we'll see if that happens this time around. Again, I don't think it will. This is a team, though, that does have no cap space. So I think there's improvements that Julien Brisebois would like to make, and just he doesn't have the space to do it. There's rumors out there as well that they're in on Casey DeSmith, but there are various teams apparently in on Casey DeSmith as Montreal looks to flip the backup goaltender they got from the Pittsburgh Penguins after flipping Petrie as well. So some interesting moves from Montreal, but we'll get back to Tampa Bay. And maybe Tampa Bay does need a backup goaltender, and DeSmith could be capable of giving them a little bit better goaltending than Elliott did last year. I don't say that as a slight to Elliott. I think DeSmith can be a good goaltender as long as he's just purely the backup. I think he's fine. Top five scorers for this team. Kucherov had a great year, 82 games, 30 goals, 83 assists, 113 points. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised he only had 30 goals. Very good shot. Prefers to pass, but excellent shot. I would not be surprised to see him score more goals this year. Probably leads to fewer assists. I think his points total stays right about the same. Braden Point, great season for Point. 82 games, 51 goals, 44 assists, 95 points. Absolutely fantastic. He'll be looking at back-to-back 50-goal seasons. Steven Stamkos played 81 games, 34 goals, 50 assists, 84 points. For Stamkos, another great year. Yes, he's getting older. He doesn't seem to be falling off at all. And for Stamkos, of course, he's in a contract year. So one of two things happens. Maybe he signs a contract before we get into the season, and maybe he has a really good year knowing he's going to stick around in Tampa. Or maybe with it being a career or contract year, he has some sort of a career year bounce back kind of thing. Knowing, hey, the better I play, the more money I can make. And that, I think that's a good motivator for most of us. The better I do, the more money I'm going to make. So, which is not always the case at your job, right? You can go out there and have a great day and here's your paycheck. But I did all that extra work. Here's your paycheck. Anyways, Brandon Hagel, 81 games, 30 goals, 34 assists, 64 points. Of course, he signed the extension a couple of days back with the team. He's not going anywhere. He has been excellent for them since they picked him up from Chicago. Mikhail Sergachev, he keeps getting better every year. 79 games, 10 goals, 54 assists, 64 points. So I would still say Hedman's the best defenseman on the team, but Sergachev is the points producer, and I would expect that trend to continue. Killorn, of course, exits the team. Would have been top five, and I mean, technically is top five with having more goals than Sergachev. But I didn't feel like it'd be fair to Sergachev to leave him off the board as technically the sixth scorer when the guy right ahead of him left the team. Killorn played 82 games, 27 goals, 37 assists, 64 points. And Killorn came up big in big games, so we'll see how the replacement works this year. Of course, they lost Palat the year before. They lost their third line coming out of that previous Stanley Cup. This is a team that does keep shedding players from that core and players who won those Stanley Cups. And so trying to replace those players, I don't envy Brisebois, as I said. This is not an easy thing to do to keep a team at the top. Vasilevsky played 60 games this past season, a 34-22-4 record, .915 save percentage. Those aren't usual Vasilevsky numbers, but they're still very good. And that's where Vasilevsky's at, that he can have numbers that are above league average, and we still say, well, we know he can do better than that, which is a compliment to him as well. And so we'll see what he looks like this year. Now, Elliott, 22 games, 12-8-2 record for him, .891 save percentage. He, of course, has left the team as a free agent. There's some talk about whether or not they're in on Casey DeSmith, who is available from Montreal. It might be a good move for them to bring him in as a backup, but we'll see. So hits leader for this team was Eric Chernak, 209 hits. Blocked shots, Sergachev at 149. So Sergachev is absolutely fantastic. He's one of the many really, really good defensemen in the National Hockey League. It gets more and more difficult every year to say, well, this is clearly the top 5 defensemen in the league, because there's always an argument to be made for almost every team has, I won't say Norris level, but maybe a Norris arguable defenseman. So the posts were not the friends of the Tampa Bay Lightning, apparently. Both Kucherov and Stamkos hit 11. So now that we're over halfway through the league, that's a lot. That's a lot of posts. And both Kucherov and Stamkos had 30 goals or more this past season. So honestly, they could have had more. Now the channel's vote tells me that people are reasonable thinking on this. So 20% of the vote says first or second. I could see that. 63% of the vote says Tampa Bay finishes third or fourth, which is about right. Because I would say that Toronto, Florida could very well end up being the top 2. Boston's still going to be in the mix. So Tampa Bay is number 3 or 4, and keeping in mind that Buffalo may jump up, and maybe we have somebody else fall off. 15% believe that Tampa Bay will be 5th or 6th. I'm guessing that part of the vote being somebody who believes that either Buffalo, Ottawa, or Detroit are going to get into a top 4 spot and push them down. 2% just don't like Tampa. 7th or 8th, and I can't make that argument. Yes, they've lost a little bit more depth, and there's some question marks, but I still could not I couldn't even try to argue them 7th or 8th. So for the next one, I really couldn't find anybody in the organization I felt like this is the next star player. They develop players very well. However, being at the top and near the top in the standings for as long as they have, making the trades involving prospects and draft picks as often as they have, there doesn't really seem to be a next one in the organization. So we're not at a point yet where everybody's really old and we're having the discussion about whether or not they have to do a rebuild. But at some point over the next few years, Tampa Bay does need to replenish the cupboard a little bit with top-notch prospects. The fantasy sleeper pick for me was Tanner Jeannot. Jeannot had a disastrous run with Tampa Bay after being acquired from Nashville. And so as long as everything settles out for Jeannot and, he's happy and Tampa's happy and they find the right line for him, I think Jeannot can bounce back offensively. Kind of hoping he does, but we'll see what happens. The MVP, I think Vasilevsky, and I went back and forth on Vasilevsky or Kucherov, but you look at Vasi's play, and he really is at this point, I think, the most valuable player, and he's going to be asked to be that as well. As this team is, I don't think any longer one of those elite top teams in the NHL. They're still pretty good, and if they're going to be elite come playoff time, it's likely going to be on Vasilevsky. The schedule isn't bad to them in October. 6 out of the 9 games in October are at home. So as long as they can assert themselves at home early in the season, they could find themselves in pretty good shape. So exits. We'll do the exits first. Alex Killorn, of course, leaves the team for a lot of money. They couldn't afford to pay him. Corey Perry moves on. Maroon got traded. Brian Elliott leaves as a free agent. Belmar leaves as a free agent. Colton got traded. And Cole ends up leaving as a free agent as well. So that's a lot of players. It's a lot of players to lose. And so for the additions, Luke Glendening, who leaves Dallas. I like Glendening's work ethic quite a bit. Not really any finish there, but he's going to be playing fourth line minutes. Logan Brown, looking for another restart. He showed some real flash and dash to his game a couple years back in St. Louis. It didn't hold though, so we'll see if another change of scenery and going to Tampa Bay turns his game around. Connor Sherry, an underrated player, good solid third line option there. Can play top six at times as well. Josh Archibald joins the team as well. That's fourth line depth. DeHaan, depth on the blue line. Jonas Johansson, at this point in time, I would think has the inside track on being the backup goaltender. Again, barring another pickup by Tampa Bay. Maybe they end up being in on Yarrow Halak. But Johansson, I don't know if he'd beat out Alnefelt. I think that would be an interesting battle in preseason and training camp. And they've also signed Austin Watson to a professional tryout. Watson, a little bit of grit, and just the idea of potentially having Watson and Jeannot on the same line, that's going to irritate the opposition, isn't it? So they're still trying to make sure that they're able to get a team out on the ice that's going to compete for a Stanley Cup, that's still a playoff team. I don't see any reason to think they won't be a playoff team, but are they going to be elite? That's the question that I have with Tampa Bay. And now, let's go to this side of the board. So, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, you can see some erosion of the regular season. And again, I get it, because they played a lot of hockey, and I think that showed up this past season too. So, 2018-2019, the year where they lost in the first round against Columbus, they had a 780 points percentage. Realized they needed to dial that back a bit, I think, and save some energy for the playoffs. That dropped to 657 in 2019-2020. They won the Cup. 670 in 2020-2021. They won the Cup. 671 the following season, 2021-2022, where they got all the way to the final before losing to Colorado. This past season, 598. So the first time they've been below 600 in terms of points percentage in a while. Which again, this happens. It happens with every team. We've watched as Pittsburgh had their rise, and now they've had a bit of a fall, and they're trying to get back up. So it is always interesting to see with teams that have won championships when the window actually closes, whatever term you want to use. And I don't think it's closed on Tampa Bay. I'm just throwing out there that they're in that territory that teams get into. Some bounce back and win. I'm thinking of the 2002 Detroit Red Wings as an example. Just as an example. That's it. Just as an example. And they had won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 97 and 98 as well. So only twice in their last 8 playoff appearances have the Tampa Bay Lightning been out in the first round. So while 2019 got a lot of attention, and rightfully so, the reality is this is a very good playoff team. Losing in the first round as they did this spring is not typical of this franchise. So if they do get back into the playoffs, they're going to be very dangerous, I do believe. Stamkos is really, at the top of most of the records now for the Tampa Bay Lightning all time. He's second in games played. He's only 34 behind Vinny Lecavalier in terms of games played. He is second all-time in assists. He's 47 behind Marty St. Louis there. So if he gets another 50 this year, he's the all-time leader in assists, which is fine with him. He's first all-time in goals and points. So why not take the lead in assists as well? Stamkos is the best Tampa Bay Lightning player I think that they've ever had. Vasilevsky has 263 career wins, which is number 1 on the list. The interesting thing with Tampa is before Vasilevsky, really the wins leader wasn't that high. Bishop is number 2 on the all-time list with 131 career wins. This is a franchise that's known as being very successful, but as I said, up until this era, this core, their success had never been for a very long period of time. It had been lightning in a bottle. It, for lack of a better term, didn't mean to use that. We'll leave it in. We'll do it live. So yeah, Vasilevsky has been great. So is this core, and it's the best run that Tampa Bay's ever had as a franchise. Now, Cooper's record as coach is ridiculous for Tampa Bay. 480 wins, 250 regulation losses, 67 losses in overtime and shootouts. He's been absolutely ridiculously good. And so I do think that for Tampa Bay, there's good reason to think they're staying in the playoffs. I will agree with the optimism. They're going to be 3rd or 4th. Absolutely. Yep, sure, that's fine. But are they still a Stanley Cup contender? Do they have enough with the additions combined with the exits? And players do get older. They get bumps and bruises along the way. But again, having that full off season because of getting eliminated in the first round could be a blessing in disguise. And maybe they get back to the 100 plus point mark And in the spring, maybe we're talking about a team that finishes in the top 2 and 20% of your rate. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just tap it upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.